Hey Devnexus, it's awesome to be back. Been a while, and we actually haven't seen each other in person for way too long. But I'm very happy to be part of this awesome virtual experience this year. So let's start. Today we're going to talk about Quarkus a little bit, and the most exciting part is we're going to talk about how it's really used out there. So instead of just talking about like little Hello World examples, I'm trying to walk you through a little bit more than just customer references. But speaking of, who am I? I'm actually Markus Eisele. You might have seen me around. I've been speaking at a couple of conferences. And yes, in the past, I have been part of the Devnexus experience, like in person in Atlanta. Man, those were the times. I'm a Java champion. My heart is a developer. So for the longest time of my professional career, I worked as a developer for a German-based SI, and I built some really large enterprise Java systems, mostly for automotive, finance, insurances, and made sure that these are successful. And guess what? Some of these are still running as of today. You can follow my latest ramblings if you want to on Twitter at myfear. That's where you'll see all kinds of things, including occasional German rants about the situation as it is today. Don't be intimidated by that. There's still the translate button, right? And also, whenever we get back to travel and you get a chance to come to Germany, there is an amazing event happening here. It's a Java conference and it's called JavaLand. The biggest added value here is obviously it's happening in a theme park. So if you've never been to Germany, if you've never been to a theme park in Germany before, this is where you get your decent cup of Java coffee and an entertaining evening session with beer and roller coasters. But that's not what we're here for today. Today, we are actually going to talk about a different kind of coffee. We're going to talk about Quarkus. And unlike all the other sessions you might have seen about Quarkus so far, today I don't want to really bore you with details about how amazing or how great it is, because the getting started experience is actually as easy as it is today. So you can like literally just go to code.quarkus.io, pick all the extensions you need. There's like a little predefined set already available. And you can literally just kickstart development by directly forking it to your GitHub, downloading it as a zip file, or just sharing it somewhere. Like it's simple as that. So I can only encourage you to really take a look and get started, because this is really everything you need to know. What we're going to talk about today is this little fancy slide. And if you paid attention to the official Red Hat marketing messaging around Quarkus, you've probably come across this one. So it basically lists the four biggest areas of use cases that Quarkus is supposed to work for. And if you take a deeper look here, it's mostly about building net new microservice applications. It's a little bit about modernization, that's mostly called monolithic applications to microservices applications. It talks about serverless workloads, obviously having Graal VM and some like native compilations in the back of the head. And it talks a lot about event-driven architectures or reactive architectures in general. But there's a lot out there, right? I mean, there's so many others out there. What makes Quarkus stand out, and why are people actually choosing Quarkus to be successful with? And I don't really want to mention these competitors, but it's obvious, right? It's Spring Boot, it's Micronaut, it's even Helidon. So there's a bunch of competition. So why are people choosing Quarkus, and how are they building their applications with it? This is kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So let's take a look and like dive right in. So the first example I brought today is from Lufthansa Technik. You might have heard about Lufthansa before. That's the famous German airline that I usually fly with. whenever I'll get back to flying whatsoever. But they also have a subsidiary that is called Lufthansa Technik. And those guys are basically maintaining airplanes. So literally as easy as that. As far as I know, for the Lufthansa group itself, but also like if you own a private jet and you need like a little maintenance done on your private jet, just give them a call because that's what they're really good at. And they are public reference for Quarkus. We had talks with them already in the past at the Quarkus Day. And if you get hands on the slides after this recording, after this talk, then you should definitely take a look at the Quarkus Day by Red Hat recordings that we collected on that page. And it's the direct link to the behind the registration page. So you get all the freebies without signing up. Do that. What they did is they built a platform called Aviator. And Aviator is basically something that models a complete plane just in data. So it's kind of their main backend system when it comes to handling plane repair operations and maintenance. And this has been built as a microservice-based architecture from the very beginning. They used to use the traditional enterprise Java technologies, including Spring Boot. And they are also a big Red Hat fan, just by the way. So you'll find little icons about Keycloak as an SSO solution, but you'll also find 3Scale as the API gateway. The thing that I found most interesting actually is that they built their teensy little APIs inside of Aviator in a new approach. And they started pretty small. So as of a couple of months ago, it's been only roughly 10 microservices built with Quarkus, but they basically replaced these heavyweight use cases that they implemented in more like a microlith fashion with Quarkus as a framework and gained a tremendous reduction in runtime resources they actually needed. What they also did is they encapsulated third-party systems. And if we take a look at the next slide, this is basically what they've been doing. So they started to see the microservice architecture as an approach to mastering complexity in their system. They wrapped existing APIs and made sure that they are cohesively usable within the application for other services to consume. Examples for that are notification API or user APIs. And they also use it as mainly a wrapper around software as a service offerings, mainly external interfaces. And they basically created 10 microservices in total. And the overall usage consumption with 3 stages and 2 instances, that roughly sums up to 60 instances, right? And they went from somewhat 6 cores and 6 gigabytes of RAM to down from 15 cores and 45 gigabytes of RAM that they used in production. So that is quite a significant gain just with this teensy amount of microservices that they would see in production. Another good example is something that you probably might have never heard about. APIcourio is an open source project, basically an API registry. We've seen API registries before. What is interesting about APIcourio is that it's basically the API registry in Red Hat Fuse. So if you look at Red Hat documentation, you'll find the name Red Hat registry somewhere. And this registry is actually built with Quarkus and meaning heavyweight Quarkus use. So what does an API registry ultimately do? They register and administrate APIs. That is kind of like the typical browse, search, view details about existing APIs, generate client SDKs as wrappers around them. But they also have a schema registry built in that is basically covering Apache Avro, JSON schemas, or even Google Protobuf. So these kind of the 2 main use cases of this open source project. And they wanted to use Quarkus heavily for some reasons. Ultimately, they wanted to make sure that everything is coming out of one glue. So no technical depth at that point. They wanted to have a really small footprint for this whole product. Obviously, as little as possible dependency conflicts. And they have one specific technical challenge in the API registry, which basically is different storage implementations. So you have a storage implementation for all kinds of things. And they wanted to be able to test all these implementations with one simple set of tests. So that was basically the main reason. And they also wanted to produce a specific registry binary for each storage implementation. So people can pick what fits their need best and still optimized for all of this, right? So they've managed to implement this with Quarkus, and using the advantages of Quarkus at build time, they could actually create a complete registry cluster with individual nodes based on various storage systems. This wouldn't have been possible easily with Quarkus and Enterprise Java APIs, so it's all well-known, built based on CDI, and reduced the complexity, so they've been able to implement this in a very, very short time, super efficient. The next example I brought you is something that you will also only find if you start looking a little bit deeper into Red Hat technologies. This is a demo that one of our German solution architects put together. And as you can tell, I don't know what the little teensy red car in the top right is actually called in America or worldwide, but we call it bobbycar. And this is like the number one toy every German grows up with. It's basically just a teensy little car you can sit on, and it's super resilient because it's like just absolutely plastic and easy to handle. And guess what? I've also owned one, and I think it looked a little bit older than that one on the top. But anyway, so what is bobbycar all about? Bobbycar basically is a complete demo for a lot of Red Hat technologies. And it's an event-based application that is mainly focusing on simulating a system for car management. So if you think about cars on the road, producing all kinds of data, delivering all kinds of information back to a centralized backend, you can do all kinds of things with these data. I'm just imagining fleet steering or whatever. So what we have in this demo, you have hundreds of bobby cars running somewhere, literally as a piece of software written in Quarkus on a simple pod somewhere, and being spun up as many as you need. So this could also be an example going into the direction of autonomous driving and computing data and surveillance, whatever you can think of. The interesting part is to the left in the slide, because this is where all the little Quarkus cars are driving around. It obviously is also a wonderful demo to give a little bit more insights into how we manage IoT and edge projects and how we envision them to be implemented. And as usual, there's way too many technologies involved here, including OpenShift and obviously also Kafka as a message broker for the event-driven parts in here. It can run and scale out seamlessly across clouds. So if you look at physical, virtual, private, whatever, it's actually in the process of being built into a complete hybrid cloud demo. So you could see these cars been spun off in the private cloud in your basement and going all the way into the public cloud while we need more cars and more resources. And because I don't want to bore you that much, there's another teensy little link down here, the other way around, down there, which is the GitHub repository. So if you want to take a deeper look, you'll definitely more than encouraged to do this. GPS position, we talked about speed, fuel consumption, CO2 emissions, Exactly. So if you want to calculate what the actual fleet of cars is actually emitting in terms of CO2, you can definitely do that with this demo. And I'm completely doing it injustice because Ottmar, the guy who's been the main developer of this demo, he can present this in a way more exciting fashion. But as usual, there's just only so little time in these presentations, and I wanted to give you a lot more pointers so you can really start digging in the areas that are really interesting to you. That was bobbycar. This is basically what it looks like, and obviously there are also fancy cars running in here. The M3 Coupe by BMW, and it's built in with Eclipse microprofile health check. So everything you see here is just seamless code that is completely profiting from the easy integration between Quarkus and microprofile. And all of this is just running inside an OpenShift cluster, obviously, as a Red Hat demo should run. Last but not least, at least from a demo perspective and customer case perspective, is Vodafone Greece. They also were one of the first public references for Quarkus, and they have a very simple use case. Basically, they are handling the streaming of events coming from some they call it journey layer into a functional microservice layer, all the way down to the traditional back office systems. And there's a little bit of a caching layer built into all of this with MongoDB. The really interesting part here is that this kind of microservice layer on top of the traditional legacy layer gives them enough room to breathe, to scale out, and to meet demands even with insanely growing client numbers these days. And they can also easily add journeys on top without having to touch legacy at all. And everything is speed up and made scalable by adding a caching layer that also can be invalidated and be used as like a buffer in between these two systems. They mainly wanted to, again, manage complexity, this time by basically putting it behind simpler journey-driven REST APIs. They also wanted to make sure that the data retrieval service is insanely fast. Everything needed to be Kubernetes based because the load is really unpredictable and needs to scale very quickly according to needs. And all this is also topped by API gateways and put into real decent microservice architecture. And it's interesting to note that the number of microservices also is currently around 120. So if somebody ever again demos a microservice example with just one service, be suspicious because that's not a system. Take a second look at the marketing slide, right? So what we've mostly seen is that people have been doing some kind of modernization approaches with Quarkus. So the monolithic to microservices architecture is definitely one of the most important use cases. I think ultimately it is about eliminating technical debt, making these monolith easier to scale, and prepping them for today's requirements is kind of the number one driver. Also, together with the new event-driven architecture, the reactive architectures in distributed systems, this is where Quarkus can easily play a simple role, giving developers simple and well-known APIs, having absolutely easy integrations into Kafka, for example, or NoSQL databases. So all this is kind of an easy use case to actually do. What we haven't seen so far is serverless. And if I say we, I mean you today, because I did not pick a serverless example here. But obviously also Quarkus is steered towards serverless. So, and whenever you start breaking down your microservices even more into functions, and you're thinking about using even less resources in production, you're ultimately thinking about GraalVM, and you're thinking about binary native compiled applications. So this is where Quarkus obviously, just by setting a compile flag, can easily satisfy that demand. And net new, also, like if you want to start a microservice slash distributed slash event driven architecture as of today, Quarkus is an easy way to get started. And this is a feedback we got from many customers and community members who've been working with Quarkus so far. It's just insanely simple to get started because we know all the concepts as like seasoned enterprise Java developers, and there's no big surprise waiting for you when you give it a try ultimately. So to make you even more excited and not only point you towards a couple of examples, I also brought you a couple of things that you probably did not know about Quarkus so far. And I have to admit, some of them are even undocumented yet, but you'll have that sooner or later. The first thing is the built-in dev console. If you have not yet seen the dev console, don't be disappointed because it's one of these undocumented features so far. So even if you go to quarkus.io, look at the guides and click to this tooling section, you'll hopefully find that in a couple of days or weeks. I don't want to make promises on behalf of the project. This is basically your web-based project investigator. As you can see in that screenshot, you have like an online code editor for configuration options. You can completely browse through your CDI beans. You can look at RESTful endpoints. It's a teensy little helpful console that is available in dev mode to you. So whenever you need to like take a look at what's really going on during runtime and don't want to hook up a debugger or any more complicated things, this is an easy way for you to go. Also, the OpenShift integration. And I'm mentioning OpenShift in the slides. It's obviously a Kubernetes integration. So whatever I'm showing here without the little addition of a feature called source to image, where OpenShift basically builds your container images for you and you don't have to do that locally. Just by adding a simple extension to a Quarkus project, you can trigger container builds in OpenShift. And you can basically just access an application that got deployed to OpenShift afterwards by looking at the OpenShift routes. So it's as simple as this. Like the guide isn't even longer than this slide. If you want to try this, you're more than welcome. I don't want to forget to mention that there's a new OpenShift sandbox, which is freely available. So you basically only need a Red Hat developer's account, sign up for the OpenShift sandbox, and you have your complete environment to play around with. And that includes Quarkus. So if you have a couple of spare minutes, just go there, sign up, and give it a try. What I also really like, and this is not really undocumented, but it's also comparably new. It's coming, I think it came live end of December-ish, and it basically enables you to experience the Quarkus dev mode, not only in a local running environment, but also by having Quarkus running in a remote container. So that basically means you are deploying a Quarkus dev mode application somewhere in a container. All this takes is basically the URL where you need to like look for the application, or where Quarkus needs to look for it, and a little bit of a password as like a first kind of security to prevent really awesome things from happening. Ultimately, this still is a development tooling, so don't even think about running this in production, because Quarkus dev mode obviously is not meant for production, just as a side note. Sebastian Daschner did write a little blog about how you can use that, and I think he used Minikube, so feel free to take a deeper look. And if somebody's asking, I know this is getting a little bit old, but these teens little 8-point kind of URLs in the very bottom that I always keep on my slides, I call them homework. So feel free to just take a look and go through it. Quarkus by default comes with the standard Sun security providers, but there's plenty of others that you might want to use. One of the more well-known ones is the Bouncy Castle security provider suite. It's actually more than one. And it's simple as adding a dependency to your Quarkus project and adding a couple of configuration parameters to your application config file. So again, a little link for you to dig into deeper, but this is basically all it takes to have a complete bouncy castle security provider enabled in your Quarkus application. And if you have not heard about JBang yet, this is kind of the last tip I want to give you today, because JBang is definitely something that you need to take a look at. It's Java from the command line, done by Max Anderson. I think I adore him for many things, but his perseverance in actually implementing something that is insanely useful with JBang, that is I am just totally in love with that. So what you can basically do is you can have a simple command line Java app, Quarkus app, started with JBang without downloading any Maven, without downloading any Java, by only defining dependencies in your Java file. And this is basically what I try to capture here. If you want to know a lot more about scripting works with Quarkus, how the command mode works with Quarkus, you definitely need to visit the guide that's available. So this is not really a secret feature, but I suspect you haven't heard about JBang. So definitely something that you can easily start a local Quarkus development environment with and just get started with your new services. Some more reading, and usually my recommendation was whenever you get back home on an airplane for a couple of hours, this is something that you could easily just take with you and get a first sneak peek into what Quarkus can do for you. Two wonderful free books, part of our Red Hat Developers Program, Practicing Quarkus and Understanding Quarkus. Both, as I said, available for free, written by Antonio. And I can only say, if you want to get started with Quarkus and you haven't looked through these books, that is definitely a mistake. So feel free to absolutely just go to developers.redhat.com/ebooks and download both. There's actually even more buried under that URL, but you can absolutely find that. I've pitched the developers program quite a few times so far. Yes, go there. Like, it's free. Register today. You'll get occasional emails with latest publications on our blog, or hints to new and upcoming books or new materials being published. You have access to the new RHEL developers program. You have access to pretty much everything that Red Hat offers, in starting with code-ready containers, like your local OpenShift development environment, going all the way to EAP, our middleware. So all the productized bits are available through the Red Hat Developers Program, and it's absolutely free. If you can hear enough from me, the German rambling in English, I can only pitch my Open Dev Hour to you, which is a series we started almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, where I'm pulling in interesting people to talk to. I'm joined by Red Hat engineering, by friends, not family, but people who want to talk about all kinds of microservices, cloud containers, Kubernetes, maybe even AI, Java in general, OpenJDK. And the lineup for this year is also shaping up pretty strong. We'll take definitely a deeper look into some Quarkus topics. I also want to make sure that we're taking a look at what the future of Java and the JDK has in stock for all of us. There's not even a registration available, so this really requires your discipline. Please take a look at that website. You can download calendar invites for individual events to keep you posted. And it should be a North American and EMEA friendly time, Germany local 4P, pretty much somewhere in the middle of the month. So keep an eye out for that one. And last but not least, I really, 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 really would like you to ask to wear a mask. Like, I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just eagerly waiting to see each and every single one of you healthy, alive, and kicking back on the conference circus and be able to have a hallway track and like deeper conversations in person whenever this is humanly possible. And the fastest and quickest way to get there is to just protect yourself as much as even possible. So with that, thank you, stay healthy, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing all of you again. Take care. Bye.